Hello and welcome back to Lacrim Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. It was the summer of 1997 when I moved through Evansville, Colorado. I say moved, but it was really more like stopping long enough to catch my breath. Evansville was supposed to be a pit stop, cheap motels, a few quick paychecks, then back on the road toward California. I had friends in San Francisco who said I could crash with them while I got on my feet, but even splitting rent 4 ways in that city took money I didn't have. After weeks of motels and fast food and gas, I was down to almost nothing. So I told myself I'd stay in Evansville just long enough to rebuild. A week, maybe 2. The town was small and quiet in a way that made it feel like it was holding its breath. One main stretch of road, a few businesses, and a visitor center that looked like it belonged on a postcard. That's where I found the flyer. Looking for a plumber's assistant. No experience needed. Competitive pay. Usually competitive pay was code for we'll pay you garbage and act like you're lucky. But I didn't have the luxury of being picky. I ripped one of the little phone number tabs off the bottom and walked outside to the nearest payphone. It was late in the day, and I honestly expected no one to answer. He picked up on the second ring. Hello. The voice on the other end was rough, the kind of gruff that sounded like decades of cigarettes. Hi, I said. I'm calling about the job. The plumber's assistant? There was a pause, long enough that I wondered if he'd set the phone down. What's your name? He finally asked. Forrest. You local? No, I admitted. I actually just got to town earlier today. Another pause. I could hear soft breathing on the line. I thought maybe he was deciding to hang up, so I rushed to fill the space. I don't have much plumbing experience, I said, trying to sound confident. But I'm a hard worker and I learn fast. You know how to hold a wrench. I told him I was good with tools because I'd worked in my dad's wood shop. That was mostly true, though worked might have been generous. Dad had me hold boards steady and sweep sawdust. He never let me touch the big saws. He always said he couldn't afford a doctor sewing my fingers back on if I got careless. The man on the phone seemed satisfied. He said I had all the experience I needed. He introduced himself as Tony. We agreed to meet for an interview the next day. The warehouse was on the east side of town. My dad's old Camry, what he'd left me, struggled on the mountain roads, whining and shuddering every time the road tilted upward. I kept one hand tight on the steering wheel and whispered at the car like it could hear me, begging it not to die before I even got hired. It made it there with a few minutes to spare. Tony was outside when I pulled in, smoking a cigarette like it was part of his uniform. He was a big man, at least 6'3" pot belly, thick glasses, heavy shoulders. He waved, not exactly friendly, but not unfriendly either, and motioned for me to follow him inside. The warehouse was packed with supplies. PVC pipes stacked in bundles, shelves filled with tools, boxes, cleaning chemicals, loose wood panels, random hardware. It looked like a strange hybrid between a plumbing business and a hoarder's garage. Got everything you need, I suppose? I said, glancing around. Just me here, and ordering supplies takes a while, so I tend to hang on to what I need. He led me toward a small office in the back. The lighting was dim, the desk stained with white paint like someone had used it as a workbench. It smelled faintly like metal and cigarettes and something else I couldn't place. You said your name is Forrest, right? He asked as he sat down. Yes, sir, I said. Forrest Aldez. Where are you from, Forrest? North Carolina, a small town called Louisville. Long way from home. Yeah, I said, shrugging. It was time for a change. Tony watched me for a moment like he was trying to decide whether that answer was real. Then he nodded slowly. Well, to tell you the truth, I just need someone I can trust. That's me, I said, smiling, trying to sound sure of myself. He leaned back. the chair creaking under him. For a few seconds, he didn't speak. He just sat there, eyes on me, making the room feel smaller. Then he leaned forward again. "Family?" he asked. I swallowed. "Got some cousins back home?" "Don't really talk to them." "And I never knew my mom." "And your dad?" He passed away a few months ago." "Sorry to hear that." "Nah," I said quickly. Too quickly. "He was sick for a long time. Honestly, I think it was for the best." Tony's eyes drifted toward a framed photo on his desk. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen yet. He picked up the frame, smiled at it, then turned it around so I could see. 3 people stood arm in arm in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. Tony, a thin woman with a gentle face, and a young boy with shaggy blonde hair, smiling like he trusted the camera. I leaned forward. Beautiful family. Tony turned the photo back toward himself and smiled. "Yes, thank you." His voice got quieter. "Family's important, most important thing there is." "You're right," I said, and for a second I meant it. Tony stared at the picture a little longer than normal, like he'd forgotten I was sitting there. Then he blinked, looked back at me, and laughed once. "Well, Forrest, I think you'd be a great addition to the team," he said. "And by team, I mean me." He stood, reached out his hand, and I shook it. His grip was strong, firm, like he was testing how much pressure it took to make someone flinch. He told me the pay before I even asked. It was less than I'd hoped for, more than I expected. Either way, it was more than my current income of nothing. "You start tomorrow," Tony said. And just like that, I had a job. For the first few weeks, working with Tony felt almost normal. We'd start early, load up the van, and drive from job to job. Most of what I did was simple. Install pipe sections, haul equipment, unclog drains, hold a flashlight while Tony did the hard parts. He was good at what he did. Fast. Confident. And when I messed up, he didn't humiliate me. He didn't talk down to me like some bosses I'd had before, the kind who make you feel stupid for not being perfect at something you learned 10 minutes ago. With Tony, it almost felt like I'd gotten lucky. Then one day we were working under a house in a crawl space. I hated small spaces. Always had. Even staying in that cheap motel in town messed with me. Something about the narrow hallway, the low ceilings, the way the air felt trapped. My dad used to say my fear of tight spaces came from something that happened when I was little, but he never told me what it was. Sometimes I'd have dreams of being in a dark, enclosed place while someone yelled outside. I never knew if it was a real memory or just my brain making things up. The crawl space was miserable. Dark, dusty. Spider webs clinging to my hair and cheeks. Bits of light slipped through cracks in the wood like thin blades. Tony stayed outside looking for the water main while I was supposed to crawl deeper and check for leaks. It was okay at first. Uncomfortable, but manageable. Then the deeper I went, the more the webs wrapped around my face. The faster my heart started to beat. My breathing got shallow, my throat tightened. I told myself to stop being a coward. I told myself it was just dirt and wood and spiders. Then a breeze moved through the crawl space. A breeze. In that enclosed space, I froze. It carried sound with it, a voice, soft and distant. At first, I told myself it had to be Tony, maybe talking to himself outside. But it wasn't his voice. I recognized it. "Forrest," the voice said. My skin went cold. I squeezed my eyes shut and shook my head like I could shake the sound out of my ears. "Stop," I whispered to myself. "Stop. Help." The light from the cracks seemed to dim. My stomach flipped like I was dropping from a height. "Stop," I said again, louder. "You have to, Forrest." Something in me snapped. Panic took the wheel. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" I yelled, crawling fast, scraping my elbows and knees, dragging myself toward the nearest patch of daylight like my life depended on it. I burst out into open air and collapsed onto the ground, rolling into a ball. My whole body shook. Tears ran down my face without permission. My heart beat so hard it felt like it was punching my ribs from the inside. A hand touched my back. I jerked, then looked up and saw the woods around the house. Still, quiet, normal. Tony stood over me with a sympathetic look that didn't match the situation at all, like he'd seen this kind of thing before. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's grab a beer." Evansville only had one bar as far as I could tell. A small place called the Watering Hole that looked like a tired gas station from the outside. Inside, it smelled like old wood, spilled alcohol, and fried food. Tony ordered drinks while I sat at a table near the back. A man at another table lifted his head and looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at Tony. Then he put his head down again. Something about that quick glance made my stomach twist, like the man had recognized me from somewhere I hadn't been. Tony returned with 2 beers and set one in front of me. "Good work today," he said. I let out a weak laugh. "Guess you didn't expect to hire such a pussy." Nothing wrong with getting scared, son. Fear's evolutionary. It tells you something's wrong. "Yeah," I said, though in my head I thought fear was meant to keep you from getting eaten by animals, not to make you lose your mind because the light changed. We drank quietly for a few minutes. "I'm really sorry," I said. I don't know what happened." Tony studied me, then signaled to the bartender. "2 shots of Jack," he called. He looked back at me. "You seem like you could use something stronger." It became the first of many shots. With each one, my muscles loosened, my thoughts softened at the edges. Laughter came easier. By the 4th shot, Tony and I were slapping each other on the back, making jokes about President Clinton like we were old friends instead of 2 men who'd met a few weeks ago. After a while, I forgot the crawl space. I forgot my own fear. I forgot the voice. Tony pulled photos from his wallet. His son, his wife, his son again. He told me his son's name was William, 11 years old. "Yeah," Tony said with a laugh. "He's at that age where he don't want to listen to nothing." I forced a smile. "What's your wife's name?" "Enora," he said, and his face softened again. "We've known each other since elementary school. She always thought I was a piece of shit, and she was right. But she agreed to go out with me in high school, and—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. He shoved the photos back into his wallet like he'd sealed something away. The silence felt heavy. Then Tony leaned forward. "You never told me how your dad died," he said. My body tensed like someone had hooked a wire to my spine. "He was sick," I said quietly. "Really sick." Tony kept leaning in, wanting more. His eyes didn't blink. "He was in a lot of pain at the end," I tried. "He couldn't even get out of bed to use the bathroom." It was hard to see him like that. My hands shook around the beer bottle. "He was always so strong, and then he was just—" I didn't want to look up again, but when I did, Tony wasn't sitting across from me anymore. He had moved beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. He smelled like beer and sunlight, and for a 6 second it reminded me of my dad. Something broke inside me. I started crying, full-body sobs that made my chest ache. And then I heard it. Forrest, Dad's voice. I lifted my head, blinking through tears. Somewhere across the bar in the dim space beyond the tables, I thought I saw a silhouette. "Dad?" I whispered. "Forrest, it's time, son," the voice said. "Time?" I slurred. "Time for what?" His voice lowered, close, like someone whispering right beside my ear. "Time to do what needs to be done." When I woke up, I was somewhere I didn't recognize. It was dark. The air smelled like old wood and damp dirt. I could hear muffled birds outside, like morning had come without me. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted like metal. I tried to sit up, and a sharp rattle answered me. Cold metal bit my ankle. I looked down and saw a thick chain locked around my leg, bolted to the wooden floor. I yanked hard, once, twice again, using everything I had. It didn't move an inch. "There's no point," a voice said from the darkness. I pressed my back to the wall, heart racing. Who's there? A pause. Then, someone who's been here longer than you. It was a man's voice, tired, worn down, like the words cost him energy. Where am I? I asked. You shouldn't have come here, the man said, and the way he said it made it feel like a fact, not an opinion. A chain rattled from the other side of the room. The man dragged himself toward me, slow. Stay the fuck away, I shouted. He stopped. Silence. Then he said quietly, Sorry, I'm not trying to scare you. My name's Graham. I'm Forrest, I said, voice shaking. Forrest, he repeated, then coughed harshly. Nice to meet you. Where are we? I asked again. He exhaled, like the answer hurt. Did you take a job as an electrician's assistant? My stomach dropped. Plumber's assistant? Ah, he said, coughing again. Well, I hate to tell you, but a door opened and a thin blade of light cut into the darkness. In the doorway stood a boy holding a tray with 2 plates. I recognized him immediately from the photo on Tony's desk. William. He looked smaller in person, maybe a foot shorter than me. His face was blank in a way kids' faces shouldn't be. Kid, I said fast, you gotta help us, please. Just watching. He took 1 plate off the tray and set it in front of me. Chicken, corn, green beans. Then he turned toward Graham. The light hit Graham enough for me to finally see him clearly, and my stomach turned. Graham was naked except for underwear. His skin was pale and thin. His eyes were bloodshot, and all over his body were black circles, each about the size of a quarter, perfectly round. Dozens of them. I didn't understand what I was seeing until my brain tried to label it as bruises, burns, something. William left without a word and shut the door, throwing us back into darkness. For a long time, I tried to convince myself there was an explanation that didn't involve madness. Tony had seemed normal. A little rough, a little lonely, but normal. A man doesn't just become a monster because he owns a warehouse and smokes too much. But then there was the chain around my ankle, the darkness, the silence, Graham's voice. Evidence doesn't care what you want to believe. Graham told me his story in pieces. Between coughs, he said he'd moved to Evansville from a few states away after getting out of jail. Back home, nobody would hire him once they found out his record. He needed a place where no one knew him. He made the mistake of trusting Tony with that truth. It made him realize no one would miss me, Graham said, voice cracking. I thought about how I'd told Tony my family was basically gone, that my dad was dead, my mom wasn't in the picture, and the only people waiting for me were some friends in California I hadn't spoken to since a music festival. Guys who had offered me a couch address while they were drunk and high and feeling generous. I'd been stupid, blinded by grief, by the need to run. I don't suppose you got anyone looking for you? Graham asked. No, I whispered. My stomach clawed at me, but I couldn't touch the food. Not yet. I kept seeing the tray in the boy's hands, the way he placed it down like feeding animals. What are those spots? I asked finally. On your body? Spots? Graham paused. Better you don't know until you have to. What do you mean? Then Tony's voice filled the room, calm as ever. Will, Tony snapped. I told you you didn't need to leave the light off unless your mother's in here. My eyes adjusted. Tony stood in the center of the room like he belonged there, like he wasn't standing over 2 chained men. His expression was relaxed, almost cheerful. Sorry about that, fellas, he said. Can't be much fun sitting in the dark. Plus, it's bad for the skin. In the full light, I saw what Graham's spots really were. They weren't spots. They were holes, perfect circular wounds about an inch deep. Some were fresh, wet, and pink. Others were scabbed over with dark red crust. The blackness I'd seen earlier was depth, shadow, and dried blood. My throat tightened. What? Looks like Swiss cheese, don't he? Tony said, almost proud. I scrambled back against the wall, screaming, kicking like I could shove myself through the wood. Tony laughed. Not much room left on you, is there? He said to Graham, loud enough to make the words feel like a threat. He knelt in front of Graham and grabbed his face, turning his head side to side like he was inspecting livestock. Nah, Tony said, squinting. I see a couple empty spaces. I choked on air. What the fuck are you doing, Tony? Tony looked at me like I'd asked something silly. I'm sorry, Forrest. I am. But you've got some time before she gets started on you. He nodded toward Graham. Still some space on him. What the fuck are you talking about? Tony's eyes dropped to my untouched plate, then back to me. You need to eat. No fucking way. I kicked the plate across the room. Food flew, splattered against the floor, against the wall. Tony sighed like a parent dealing with a tantrum. He walked over slowly, picked up the plate, and then, one piece at a time, he rebuilt the meal from the filthy floor. Chicken leg, corn, green beans. He even scraped up the ones that landed in dust and grit and pressed them onto the plate, watching me the entire time. Then he said it right in front of me again. Graham here will tell you what happens when you don't eat, Tony said softly. But don't worry, I'll leave the light on this time. He walked out and shut the door. Graham shook like a dog in a thunderstorm. Later, after I begged him to explain, Graham told me what happens when you refuse food. He said when he was first taken, he refused too. For days, he fought hunger like it was the only thing he could control. Tony threatened him, starved him, told him he'd regret it. About a week in, Tony came into the room, held him down, and forced a pill down his throat. When Graham woke up, he was tied flat to the floor. A thick plastic tube was shoved into his mouth, down his throat, deep into his stomach. He could feel it inside him, scraping, making him gag until there was nothing left to gag up. Tony had a funnel and a pitcher filled with thick white sludge. Graham said he could see chunks floating in it, green beans, pieces of chicken. He didn't have to describe every detail. My body filled in the rest, and it made me feel like I was going to vomit even though my stomach was empty. The worst part was them pulling the tube out, Graham said. I stared at my plate for a long time. Then I picked up the chicken leg and took a slow bite. It was cold, bland, no seasoning. But after going without food, it tasted like survival. Why are they doing this? I asked, nodding toward the holes in Graham's skin. His wife? Graham said. Tony's wife? She's the one doing it? My throat tightened. Is she taking pieces of him? Graham didn't answer right away. He looked away, and when he spoke, his voice was small. I think she's almost done with me. I wanted to ask what done meant. I wanted to ask what she did with the flesh, why the wounds were so perfect, how a human could do that without a tool. But Graham started crying, silent tears slipping down his cheeks, and I couldn't bring myself to push him. Have you tried to escape? I asked. I haven't, he said, but the person here before me did. His voice went flat. She didn't get far. Before I could ask more, the light clicked off. Darkness slammed into the room, complete and thick. Graham's screaming started immediately, like his body knew what the dark meant. At first, the sounds in the hallway were distant, muffled movement, something dragging across wood. Then it got closer, scraping, slow, like claws or something hard and sharp pulled along the floorboards. There was also a moaning sound, wet and labored, like someone struggling to breathe through mucus. It didn't sound like a person walking. It sounded like a dying animal that refused to die. Graham sobbed nonstop, his voice getting weaker as the scraping reached our door. I curled into a ball against the wall, pressing my face into my knees, trying to become small enough to disappear. The door creaked open. A pause. Then the scraping came into the room, moving toward Graham. Graham whimpered. There were wet, sloppy sounds like something biting into raw meat. Then a loud pop. Then Graham shrieked so hard I thought it would tear his throat. The sounds went on for minutes. Long minutes where I sat frozen, imagining the worst because imagination was all I had. Eventually, the noises stopped. A pause, like the creature was listening. Then scraping again, retreating back down the hallway farther and farther away until it faded. I couldn't breathe right until I was sure it was gone. "Graham," I whispered. "What was that?" It was her, he said, voice broken. His wife. The lights came back on later. I don't know how long. It felt like hours. Graham sat across the room, rocking slightly like a kid who'd been punished. When my vision cleared, I saw a new wound on his face, just under his left eye. A perfect round hole like the others. "Shit," I whispered. The door opened again, and Tony came in carrying supplies. Gauze, bandages, peroxide. Like this was a routine, like he was running a clinic instead of a torture room. Graham flinched as Tony dabbed the wound with peroxide. I started shaking so hard my teeth clicked. "What the fuck are you doing?" "Cleaning his wound," Tony said casually, like I was the idiot. "What's it look like?" "You're a crazy fucking redneck," I spat. "You and your whole fucking family." Tony glanced at me. "You didn't tell me you had such a mouth on you. What kind of sick shit are you doing? Making skin coins or something?" Tony laughed. "Skin coins? What does that even mean?" He shook his head like I was adorable. "Some imagination you've got, Forrest. What's your wife doing with the skin she's taking from him?" Tony handed Graham gauze and made him press it to his face. Then Tony stood and walked toward me. "Graham here is keeping my wife alive," Tony said. I pressed myself harder against the wall. "Your wife is dead," I wanted to say, but I didn't know that yet. Not then. Tony crouched down in front of me, voice getting quieter, almost gentle. "She got sick a few years back," he said, wasting away right in front of me and my son. "Those doctors said there wasn't nothing they could do." He shook his head, eyes narrowing. "But we found a way." My stomach turned. "By taking him apart?" Tony smiled and placed his hand on my shoulder. I jerked away and the smile didn't change. "I'm sorry you couldn't do the same for your father," he said. That line hit me like a punch. My breath caught. Tony stood and walked out, leaving us with the light on and the terror still pulsing in the air. Hours later, Graham's breathing grew worse. His cough sounded deeper, wetter, like something was filling his lungs. "We have to get out," I whispered. "We just have to figure out how. Where even is this place?" "The girl before me said it was a house," Graham said. "But there aren't neighbors nearby. No one close." "Do they have a vehicle?" "There's an old truck outside," Graham said. "She didn't know if it runs." I swallowed and stared at the wall, trying to think through panic. "You should drop it," Graham said suddenly. His voice was flat. "When that woman tried to escape, they made sure she couldn't try again." He nodded toward the back wall. In the light, I saw 3 holes arranged in a long triangle. "You ever seen a crucifix?" he asked. I felt bile rise in my throat. I didn't want to imagine a person pinned there. I did, anyway. "I'm not making it much longer," Graham said. He rolled over and lifted his shirt. His back was stained yellow. It was covered in circular wounds like the rest of him. But near the center was something worse, an ugly bruise that spread under the skin. He pulled the shirt higher. A cluster of wounds had merged into one large yellow patch about the size of my palm, outlined in black. "It's infected," he whispered. "Tony doesn't know. If we get out, we can get you help," I said. Graham looked at me like I was a child. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, "and you shouldn't try." Tears filled my eyes. "So I should just sit here and wait for them to do to me what they did to you." He just watched me with a kind of sad patience. The pressure in my chest built until I couldn't hold it. "Have you ever watched anyone die?" I asked. Graham shook his head slowly. "My dad was sick," I said, voice breaking. "He was in so much pain I knew he'd be better off if it just ended." I wiped my face, but I didn't want him to. He was my dad, he was all I had. The confession poured out like poison. Toward the end, he was vomiting all the time. He couldn't control anything. He told me every part of him hurt every second. I swallowed hard. He begged me to. I looked up, like my dad might be somewhere above the ceiling listening. I took his gun. I whispered. Put a pillow over his face and... I couldn't finish the sentence, but the gunshot finished it for me inside my head. The memory echoed like it was happening again. I dropped my head to my knees and sobbed until my stomach hurt. We sat in silence after that, except for my crying and Graham's shallow breathing. An hour or so later, William returned with food again. He slid the trays to us. I stared at him with a mix of anger and fear. He didn't meet my eyes. He bit his lip and looked at the floor like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Then he left. Graham ate weakly. I forced myself to eat too because hunger is a kind of leash, and I needed strength if I was going to survive. As I finished, I stared at the leftover bones on my plate. The broken chicken bone with its sharp, jagged end looked like something else for the first time. A tool. An idea started to form. That night, Graham died. He had a coughing fit, worse than the others, and then he went quiet. When I looked at him, his eyes were open, staring at nothing, fixed and empty. William found him in the morning. He called for Tony. Tony dragged Graham's body out of the room without ceremony, like moving a bag of trash. When the door shut, I released a shaky breath. Graham's death meant one thing. The next time Tony's wife came into that room, she would be coming for me. I wanted to run immediately, but I understood something grim. I had to wait for the right moment. I had to choose the moment where my fear didn't get me killed. That moment came when the lights went out. Darkness again, heavy and total. Then the scraping in the hallway returned. Closer, closer. That awful dragging sound and the wet moaning that didn't sound human. The door creaked open. Scraping moved into the room. I pressed myself flat to the wall and held my breath, trying not to exist. The sound stopped right in front of me. There was no breath, no warmth, nothing to prove a body was there. Then, suddenly, pain exploded in my neck. Something bit me. Not a knife, not a tool, teeth. A mouth latched onto my throat like a dog on meat. I felt a tongue, the slick, wet pressure, the saliva mixing with blood. I screamed and grabbed at her head. The skin felt cold and dry, like old leather. She didn't let go. That's when I used my last chance. My hand fumbled into my back pocket and found the broken chicken bone. The jagged edge pressed into my palm. I drove it forward, aiming for where her neck should have been. It sank in. She wailed. The sound was high and violent, like it could shatter glass. My ears rang. The pressure on my neck released, and I heard frantic scuttling across the floor like a huge insect fleeing into darkness. Then there was movement above us, heavy footsteps. "Honey?" Tony called down the hall. "What's wrong?" The lights snapped on. Tony appeared in the doorway and came straight for me, face twisted with rage. He grabbed my collar and yanked me forward. I didn't hesitate. I stabbed him in the back with the bone. Once. Twice. Again and again, anywhere I could reach. He screamed, twisting, trying to throw me off, but I clung to him with a desperate strength I didn't know I had. With my free hand, I clawed at his pockets until I found keys. He shoved me away, and I hit the floor hard. Tony stumbled out of the room, clutching his back, blood soaking his shirt. I jammed keys into the lock with shaking hands, one after another, until finally the chain released with a click and dropped to the floor. I slipped into the hallway on bare feet, moving fast but quiet. The front door was in sight. Then I saw movement outside through a side window. Tony and William were coming toward the house from outside, both carrying tools, saws, wrenches, knives, like they'd gone out to arm themselves. Panic slammed into me. I looked for somewhere to hide and saw only a staircase. I ran up it just as the front door opened. We'll show that son of a bitch what happens when someone hurts your mother, Tony growled. From above, I watched them head down the hall toward the room I'd escaped. My choices were simple: run and risk being seen, or hide and wait. Tony shoved something into William's hands. A pistol. Here, Tony said. Take my pistol. Aim for his kneecap so he stays alive. But, Dad, William said, voice shaking, I've never... I don't think I can shoot someone. Tony's voice hardened. You know why we do this, right? So Mom can stay alive. That's right. And that's what matters. I didn't wait for him to get close enough to see me. I crept down the upstairs hallway and found a door at the far end. Inside was pitch black. I slipped in and shut it quietly behind me. I crawled on my hands and knees trying to find a window, trying to find a way out that didn't involve walking right into them. A thin streak of moonlight cut through a break in two blankets hung over a window. I crawled toward it, relief rising in me. If I could get out through that window, I could make it to the truck. I reached for the blanket. Something touched my bare foot. Cold and dry. I turned. In the moonlight, I saw a pale gray mass, strands of dark hair hanging from it like wet seaweed. A head. But it didn't have what a head should have. No eyes. No nose. No ears. Where the face should have been, there was only a round hole near the bottom, lined with flat teeth going deeper than I could see, like a lamprey. I yanked the blanket down in panic, flooding the room with moonlight. And I finally saw her, a skeletal body on all fours, covered in holes, deep dark circles all over her skin. These weren't fresh wounds like Graham's. The edges were lined with thick skin, and as I stared, the lining of the holes moved in and out like small mouths, opening and closing, opening and closing. My body locked up. I couldn't even breathe right. Free, a weak voice rasped. Free me. It didn't seem to come from her mouth. It seemed to come from somewhere else on her body, like the sound was traveling through her. She reached into the darkness and tossed something toward me. My hand found it on the floor. A butcher's blade. Heavy, cold. Can't myself, the voice said. She lifted her head and stretched her neck out, exposing the soft skin under her chin. There was a large hole there, too, bigger than the others. Please, she said. Free me. I stared at the knife, then at her. Even though she didn't look human, despair rolled off her like heat. I can't, I whispered. Mom, a soft voice said from the doorway. I hadn't heard William come in. He stood there staring, eyes wide, fixed on the knife in my hand. Then his gaze snapped to his mother. His mother, still on all fours, neck stretched, begging me without words to do it. Mom? William cried, and the sound tore something in my chest. He ran to her. I didn't hesitate anymore. I ran to the window, ripped it open, and climbed out. I ended up on the roof edge. 2 stories down, the ground below looked hard enough to break bones. If I landed wrong, I'd be trapped. In the yard, I saw the old truck Graham had mentioned. I felt the keys in my pocket and prayed the right one was there. Behind me, Tony's wife wailed so loudly I had to clamp my hands over my ears. Tony shouted something from inside the house. I slid off the roof. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and somehow didn't break anything. Scratches tore my skin, but pain didn't matter. I sprinted for the truck, yanking the keys out as I ran. There he is, Tony shouted from an upstairs window. I jumped into the truck and jammed the first key into the ignition. Wrong. Second key. Wrong. Third. Wrong. My hands shook so badly I could barely aim. It felt like the ring had 100 keys on it. Finally, the last key. I shoved it in. It didn't fit. I screamed and jammed it again and again until my hand hurt, but it still wouldn't go. Fuck, I shouted. A tap came at the window. Tony stood outside smiling, holding a different keyring in his hand. A gun was pressed into my back a second later as he forced me out of the truck. He started walking me back toward the house, his voice calm again, like he was proud he'd caught me. Then a gunshot cracked the air. It didn't come from Tony. We both turned. William stood there with the pistol, smoke curling from the barrel. Tony looked down at his shoulder, and I saw blood seeping through his shirt. The gun slipped from Tony's hand and hit the dirt. Tony screamed. I moved faster than thought. I snatched the gun and grabbed the keys from Tony's hand as I climbed back into the truck. Tony looked at William, eyes wild. "What are you doing, boy?" "Mom doesn't want this," William said, crying. "We have to stop." "You little shit," Tony snarled as I turned the key and the engine finally caught. "You know how far I had to go to find someone who could fix your mom?" "That witch didn't fix her," William cried. "She cursed her. And you think just because she's alive it's better. At least she's with us," Tony shouted back. I slammed the truck into gear. William stood in the driveway with tears pouring down his face, and for a brief second time felt slow, like my brain was trying to memorize him. "But she doesn't want to be," William sobbed. "She'd rather be dead. She just told me. She told me you won't let her." I hit the gas hard and the truck lurched forward, dirt and gravel spraying behind me. As I drove past William, we met eyes. His look wasn't just sadness. It was exhaustion. It was a kid carrying a life he never chose. I watched him shrink in the rearview mirror until the road curved and he disappeared. I drove until my hands stopped shaking enough to hold the wheel without swerving. Then I kept driving. When I finally reached somewhere with a phone, I called the police and told them what I could say out loud without sounding like I belonged in a hospital. They went to the property. By the time they got there, it was cleared out. Empty, no chains, no bodies, no Tony, nothing that looked like proof. Just a house that could have belonged to anyone. No trace of Tony was ever found, at least not as far as I know. Later, when I was able to think clearly enough to search, I found an obituary for Tony's wife. She had died 3 years before Tony kidnapped me. The newspaper photo showed her smiling brightly, Tony on one side, William on the other. A normal family picture, the kind you'd frame and hang above a desk. I still hope they find Tony one day, even though he'd be old now, if he's alive at all. Not only because he deserves justice, but because there's a part of this story that never stopped bothering me, William. Sometimes I get this random urge, out of nowhere, like a tug in my chest, and it's always the same thought. I want to know what happened to him. I want to believe he escaped that life. I want to believe he didn't grow up into the same monster his father was. And if I ever did see him again, I think I'd tell him something simple. That I understood, in at least one small way. Because even though our situations weren't the same, at the end of the day we were both just boys trying to survive the plans our fathers made for us. Story 2. I died. I know I died. There are some things the body understands before the mind has time to shape them into words. Death was like that. I did not need a doctor to tell me. I did not need flashing lights, machines, voices, or someone pressing fingers to my neck. The moment it happened, I knew. I had been an old man by then, truly old. Not the kind of old where people joke about gray hair and sore knees, but the kind where everyone speaks to you softly because they have already begun to imagine the world without you in it. My hands shook when I lifted a cup. My steps had become slow and careful. My skin had thinned. My bones had turned fragile and loud. Every morning, something new hurt, and every night, something old hurt, worse. But I was not angry about it. I had lived. That is more than many people get to say. My children were grown. My grandchildren were grown too, or near enough. They had their own lives, their own homes, their own problems, their own children running through kitchens and leaving toys in hallways. I had watched them become people. I had watched birthdays, graduations, weddings, new houses, new jobs, first steps, last school plays, and all the small, beautiful things that fill a life when you are lucky enough to live long enough to witness them. My wife had been gone for 10 years. That was the part of old age I never got used to. People told me time would soften it. They said grief would become easier to carry. In a way, they were right. After enough years, grief no longer feels like a knife entering your chest every morning. It becomes more like a stone in your pocket. Always there, always heavy. Sometimes forgotten for a moment until your hand brushes it and you remember all over again. But missing her and every room. I missed her in the kitchen most of all. She used to hum when she made tea, a quiet, tuneless sound that used to annoy me when we were young and the house was busy. After she died, I would have given anything to hear it again. I missed the way she folded towels, the way she scolded birds for eating too much from the feeder, the way she always pretended she wasn't cold when she clearly was, just so I would put my arm around her. I missed her chair on the porch. That evening, I was sitting beside it. Her rocking chair had stayed exactly where it had been for years, on the front porch facing the western sky. I never let anyone move it. My daughter once suggested putting it in storage because the wood had begun to warp, and I looked at her so sharply that she never mentioned it again. That chair was hers. Mine sat beside it. That was where we had spent countless evenings together, watching sunsets, talking about nothing, and growing old in the slow, quiet way people do when they trust each other completely. The sunset that night was beautiful. Orange and gold spread across the sky, fading into purple near the edges. The trees at the end of the yard were dark shapes against the light. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. The air smelled like cut grass and cooling earth. My hands rested on the arms of my rocking chair, and beside me, her chair moved slightly in the breeze. For a moment, I could almost pretend she was there. I had made her a promise a long time ago. We were young when I first said it, young enough to believe promises could defeat death. We were lying in bed during a thunderstorm, and she had asked me, half laughing and half serious, what I thought happened after people died. I told her I didn't know. She told me she hoped we found each other again. I promised her we would. Every lifetime, I said, no matter where we ended up, no matter what names we had, no matter what shape the world took, I would find her. She laughed at me and called me dramatic, but she cried a little too. After that, it became our thing. Through hard years, through fights, through sickness, through the slow betrayals of aging, one of us would say it. Every lifetime. And the other would answer, every one. So when I sat on that porch as an old man staring at that sunset from the rocking chair beside hers, I was not afraid. If anything, I was ready, more than ready. I was tired in the deepest part of myself, not sad, not desperate, just finished. My life had been full, and the person I loved most was somewhere beyond my reach. I had stayed as long as I could for the children, for the grandchildren, for birthdays and holidays and phone calls. But that evening, with the sky burning gold and her empty chair creaking beside me, I found myself silently asking God to take me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet wish. Please, I'm ready now. Then the pain came. It started in my left arm, a deep ache, heavy and strange, traveling down through my shoulder. Then came the pressure in my chest, tight at first, then crushing like an invisible hand had closed around my heart. I knew what it was. I had known men who died that way. I had seen enough medical pamphlets in waiting rooms. I should have called someone. I should have reached for the phone sitting on the small table beside me. But I didn't. A tear slipped down my cheek, and I smiled. Because I thought of her. I thought, finally. My vision darkened at the edges. The sunset blurred. The trees became one black line. The porch boards tilted and stretched. The pain rose, then became distant as if it belonged to someone else. The last thing I saw was her empty rocking chair beside mine. Then everything disappeared. I cannot properly explain what came after. It was not a dream. Dreams have shape. Even strange dreams have color, movement, memory, feeling. This was not that. It was not heaven. It was not hell. It was nothing. Vast, endless nothing. No light, no sound, no body, no pain. No thoughts, at least not the way I had known thoughts before. Time did not work there. It may have lasted 1 second. It may have lasted 10,000 years. There was no way to measure it because there was nothing to measure against. But in that nothing, I felt one thing: peace. Pure peace. Not happiness exactly. Happiness has energy. It rises and moves and wants to be shared. This was quieter, deeper. It was relief, the end of breath after a lifetime of breathing, the setting down of every burden. No old bones, no aching joints, no grief, no lonely chair beside me, nobody at all. For the first time in 10 years, I did not miss her painfully. I simply knew I was going toward her. Or so I believed. Then the lights came back on. Not real lights. There was no brightness. In fact, it was darker than anything I had ever known. But awareness returned. Suddenly, I existed again, and existing was agony. I was trapped. That was the first thought. Not alive, not dead. Trapped. I was enclosed inside a space so tight I could barely move. My body was folded in on itself, curled and compressed. My knees were near my chest. My arms pressed against me. My head was bent awkwardly. I tried to stretch, but there was nowhere to stretch. The walls around me were not stone or wood or metal. They were flesh, wet, warm, and slimy. When my hands shifted, my palms slid across soft, living tissue. The walls squelched under my touch. They flexed and pulsed faintly, as if the prison itself were breathing. I jerked away in horror, but there was nowhere to go. Every part of me touched it: my back, my shoulders, my feet, my face. I tried to scream. I don't know if sound came out. If it did, it went nowhere. The darkness swallowed it. Panic ripped through me. I kicked. I pushed. I clawed at the slick walls. They gave slightly, stretching, then pressed back against me. I could not see my hands, but I felt them slide over membranes in soft folds. The air was thick and wet. Not air, exactly. Something else. Something I should not have been breathing, if breathing was even what I was doing. From outside my prison, I heard voices. Muffled, distant, warped at first. They were nothing but vibrations. Low sounds passing through layers of flesh and fluid. Over time, I began to understand that they were human voices. Not clearly, never clearly, but enough to know they were there. And they were happy. That was the worst part. Whenever I moved, they reacted. If I kicked, voices rose in excitement. If I pushed against the walls, they laughed or gasped or spoke with joy. They were celebrating. Celebrating my struggle. Celebrating my imprisonment. I did not understand. I thought I had died. I had felt death. I had accepted it. I had been at peace. Why was I here? What kind of afterlife was this? What kind of punishment? I thought of my wife. Her face became my anchor. In that dark, wet prison, I held on to her with everything I had. Her smile, her laugh, the way her hair looked when sunlight caught it, her hands kneading dough, her voice saying my name when she was annoyed but still amused, her fingers intertwined with mine on the porch. Every lifetime, I had promised. Every one. Maybe this was a test, I told myself. Maybe I had to endure this before reaching her. Maybe everyone passed through a darkness before light. But days passed, or weeks, or months. I do not know. Time had no shape in that place either. But unlike the nothingness after death, this was not peaceful. This was suffering stretched out without markers. There was no sunrise, no sunset, no clock, only pressure, heat, darkness, and the voices outside. The walls grew tighter. At first, there had been a little room to move. Not much, but enough to shift my hands, bend my knees, turn slightly. Slowly, that space vanished. The walls pressed closer day by day. They squeezed my shoulders inward. They pushed my knees tighter against me. They bent my neck. They forced me smaller and smaller inside them. I fought. God forgive me. I fought like an animal. I kicked and punched and thrashed until I exhausted myself. Each movement brought cheers from outside. Those muffled voices would rise with excitement, as if my torment were a show. Sometimes I heard laughter. Sometimes I heard what sounded like crying, but joyful crying. Sometimes there was a voice close to the wall, speaking softly, almost lovingly. I hated that voice. I hated all of them. I could not understand why they were happy. I was in hell, and they were rejoicing. Eventually, hope began to fade. Even my wife's face grew harder to hold. That terrified me more than the walls. I had made my promise to her. I had died smiling because I believed I was going to find her. But inside that prison, memory became slippery. Her voice sometimes sounded far away. Her features blurred at the edges. I clung harder. I repeated her name inside my mind until it became the only prayer I knew. I will find you. I promised. I will find you. But the walls kept shrinking. The pressure became unbearable. I was upside down now, or at least I thought I was. Orientation meant little in total darkness, but I felt my head lower than my feet. My body was curled so tightly that I could not move my arms. My face was pressed against slick flesh. My legs were trapped. Every breath, or whatever passed for breath there, became a struggle. The voices outside became louder, not clearer. Louder, a roaring crowd beyond the walls. I heard panic in them now. Urgency, commands, encouragement. The prison tightened around me in waves, squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing. Each contraction crushed me with terrible force. I thought this was the end. A second death. Then light appeared. A crack of brightness opened ahead of me. After so long in darkness, it was blinding. I would have covered my eyes if I could move my hands. The walls around me convulsed. The voices outside became a frenzy. Then, two enormous hands reached into my prison. They grabbed my head, my face, my shoulders. I tried to pull away, but I was too weak and too trapped. The hands were impossibly large, rough and gloved, invading the only world I had known since death. They tugged. Pain exploded through me. The walls resisted. My body was squeezed, dragged, twisted. I felt like I was being torn between the prison that wanted to keep me and the hands that wanted to pull me out. The light grew brighter. The voices sharpened. For the first time, I understood words. Just breathe, ma'am. Breathe and push as hard as you can. Ma'am. The words struck me harder than the pain. Ma'am, not me. Not an old man. Not a corpse waiting for heaven. A woman. A woman outside the walls. A woman pushing. The hands pulled again. The prison convulsed. I slid forward into light. Cold hit me first. Cold air on wet skin. Then sound, real sound, loud and terrible. Voices, medical equipment. Someone shouting instructions. Someone crying. My body unfolded in ways that felt impossible. My lungs burned. I'd tried to scream in horror. What came out was the cry of a newborn baby. They lifted me into the world. I could not control my limbs. They flailed small and weak in the air. My hands were tiny. My fingers curled helplessly. My old body was gone. My wrinkled skin, my aching joints, my thin arms, my wedding ring, my life, all of it had been stripped from me. I was not in hell. I had been in a womb. I had died as an old man and awakened as an unborn child. Now I was born again. The room was bright and full of strangers. A nurse held me. Someone wiped fluid from my face. Someone cut something away from me. The woman on the bed sobbed, exhausted and overwhelmed, reaching for me. My mother. No, not my mother. A stranger. I wanted to tell them I was not supposed to be there. I wanted to tell them I had already lived. I had children older than the woman who had just given birth to me. I had grandchildren. I had buried a wife. I had made a promise I wanted to ask where my wife was. I wanted to say her name, but I had no words. Only cries. They wrapped me in a blanket and placed me against the woman's chest. She held me and wept with joy. Her heartbeat thundered beneath my ear. It was fast, alive, unfamiliar. Everyone in the room celebrated. Now I understood the voices from inside the darkness. They had not been laughing at my misery. They had been waiting for me, loving me, hoping I would move, hoping I would live. That should have comforted me. It did not. Because I remembered. I remembered the porch, the sunset, the pain in my arm, the peace after death. My wife's chair, her name. But even as I lay there, tiny and helpless against a stranger's chest, I felt the edges of those memories beginning to soften. That was the true horror, not rebirth. Forgetting. I could feel the new brain closing around me. Small, unformed, too weak to hold an old man's life. Memories slipped like water through fingers. My wife's face blurred again. My children became shapes. My grandchildren faded into warmth without names. The porch dimmed. The sunset lost its color. I fought harder than I had fought in the womb. Inside my tiny skull, I screamed, every lifetime, every one. I tried to hold on to her name. Just her name. If I could keep that, maybe I could find her. Maybe when this new body grew and learned to walk and speak and remember, I could search for her. Maybe she had been reborn too. Maybe she was somewhere out there, under a different name in a different body, waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. But the world pressed in. The woman's heartbeat, the smell of skin, the cold air, the blanket, the bright lights, my own crying. The old life receded. I felt myself becoming smaller, not my body, myself. The man I had been was being folded away, hidden beneath hunger, warmth, fear, and instinct. Soon there would be milk, sleep, new names, new voices, new hands holding me, a new life stacking itself over the old one until the old one became nothing but a dream I would never be able to explain. Someone said, "He's beautiful." They were talking about me. The woman kissed my head. "My baby," she whispered. I wanted to hate her. I could not. She loved me already. I could feel it in the way she held me. That made it worse somehow. This was not punishment to her. This was a miracle. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe this was what came after for everyone. Not clouds, not fire, not darkness. Just return. Again and again. Lives stacked on lives, promises made and forgotten, lovers passing each other in grocery stores and hospital rooms and crowded streets, without ever knowing they had spent entire lifetimes searching. The thought broke what remained of me, my wife. I tried once more to see her face. For one shining second, she was there, young and old at once, laughing in our kitchen, sitting beside me on the porch, wearing the dress she wore on our wedding day, tired and beautiful in a hospital bed 10 years before my own death. Her hand in mine as she whispered, "Every lifetime." The nurse smiled. "Strong lungs," she said. They thought I was crying because I was newborn. Maybe I was. Maybe by then there was no difference. As they carried me away to clean me, I felt sleep pulling me down. Not the peaceful nothing I had known after death. A small infant sleep, heavy and warm. It came with no choice. I tried to stay awake. I tried to remember the porch, the rocking chairs, the sunset, her name, but the new life closed around me. And just before I slipped under, one thought remained, fragile as a match flame in a storm. I promised I would find you. Then even that began to fade. Story 3. Before anyone starts freaking out, please relax. I was portraying a Union soldier. I was with the 105th Ohio. I never wore gray in my life, not even once. I know how people get when they hear Civil War reenactor, and I know the assumptions that come with it. But that is not what this is about. This is about what I saw on the field, or maybe what saw me. I have tried to forget it. I have tried laughing it off with the other guys. I have tried telling myself I hit my head harder than I thought, and my brain just built some nightmare out of pine trees, smoke, and cannon fire. But that explanation has never sat right with me, because I remember it too clearly, and because I know what I saw in that hollow. Reenacting and living history attract every kind of person you can imagine. Some of the best people I have ever known came from that hobby. Families who spend weekends teaching forgotten crafts, old musicians who can play songs nobody under 70 has heard before, people who care deeply about preserving history, not just playing soldier. Then you also get the insufferable ones, the guys who cannot go 5 minutes without correcting the stitching on your haversack. The ones who act like they personally knew Sherman because they read 3 books and memorized the color of his tie at some obscure battle. The men who think a period-correct kit makes them tough enough to survive an actual campaign, even though they get winded walking from camp to the parking lot. It is a mixed crowd. Different backgrounds, different politics, different reasons for being there. Some people like the history, some like camping, some like black powder, some just like having an excuse to smoke cigars and talk around a fire. But there is one thing almost everyone in the hobby has in common. We have all seen weird things. Everyone has a story. Most people will not tell those stories to outsiders because outsiders either laugh or assume you are making things up. And to be fair, some of the stories probably are nonsense. People love to exaggerate, especially around campfires after a few drinks. But then there are the other stories, the ones told quietly. The ones where the person speaking stops smiling halfway through. The ones that do not sound like entertainment. Those are the stories you remember. It makes sense, I guess. Most events happen in or near state parks, national parks, preserved battlefields, old farmland, or wooded places that have been left alone for a long time. A lot of blood has soaked into that kind of ground. A lot of fear, too. If anything strange is going to linger somewhere, it makes sense that it would linger in places where men once screamed for their mothers and died with dirt in their mouths. My experience happened during a siege battle event. I will not name the location. Some of the guys still go there, and I do not want to start trouble or feed rumors. I will only say it was in a wooded area with a reconstructed earthen fort and a lot of pines. The kind of place that smells like smoke, damp leaves, and old soil even before the black powder starts. I normally did artillery. That was where I was comfortable. I liked the crew work, the rhythm, the commands, the deep boom that rolled through your chest when everything went right. I was not bad with a rifle, but I was not graceful with one either. Still, for that event, they needed more men on the skirmish line, so I joined the infantry for the afternoon. It was fun at first. The crowd was good. The weather had cooled just enough that nobody was dying in their wool. The smoke hung low between the trees after every volley. The officers were shouting, the drummers were doing their best. The whole thing had that chaotic, theatrical energy that makes reenacting feel alive for a few minutes. We were playing the final part of the battle. The plan was simple. Our line would advance, trade fire, then charge over the outer works and into the fort where the Confederate reenactors were waiting. It was supposed to be the grand finale. Lots of shouting, smoke, falling bodies, and enough noise to send the spectators home happy. I remember our captain raising his sword. I remember the command, charge. Everyone around me broke forward. Men yelled, rifles flashed. Smoke rolled across the ground. The whole blue line surged toward the battlements. I did not make it 3 steps. My new brogans had smooth soles. Anyone who has worn new ones knows exactly how stupid that is on damp grass. My foot slid out from under me, and I went down hard on my side. Then my head hit something. A root, maybe. A stone. I am still not sure. Pain flashed white behind my eyes. I lay there in the pine, straw, and leaves, cussing under my breath while the battle roared ahead of me. Nobody stopped to check on me. I figured they thought I was taking a hit and playing dead, which is fair. People dropped during charges all the time. For a minute or two, I just stayed down. The rifles kept firing. Men shouted. Someone nearby yelled like he had been shot, probably with more drama than necessary. I remember trying to sit up and feeling the world tilt sideways. Then everything started to fade. Not all at once. The sounds of the battle pulled away like someone was lowering the volume. The gunfire became muffled. The shouting grew distant. Even the smell of black powder seemed to thin out. I closed my eyes for what I thought was only a second. When I opened them again, it was night. Not evening, not sunset. Night. Pure, heavy darkness had fallen over the woods. I pushed myself up slowly, confused and dizzy. My head throbbed. My rifle lay beside me in the leaves. I picked it up mostly because it was there and because holding something solid made me feel less lost. At first, I thought the event was over and everyone had somehow left me behind. Then I looked around. There was no fort, no spectators, no battlefield, no lanterns in camp, no voices, just trees. Endless rows of pine and oak stretching in every direction, their trunks black against the moonlight. The air felt colder than it should have, the kind of cold that does not just touch your skin but settles into the joints. I called out, "Hey." My voice sounded small. No answer. I shouted the names of the guys I had come with. Nothing. I started walking, trying to find the road or the camp or the visitor center, anything. But every direction looked the same. Pine straw underfoot, dark trunks, low branches, patches of moonlight on the ground. After a few minutes, I began to panic. I did not have my phone. That is normal at events. A lot of us leave phones in camp or in vehicles to avoid carrying modern stuff on the field. Usually, it is not a problem. Usually, you are surrounded by hundreds of people. I was not surrounded by anyone. I shouted until my throat hurt. I walked in circles, though I did not realize it at first. Every time I thought I had found a landmark, it turned out to be another tree, another dip in the ground, another patch of brush. I was close to tears, and I am not ashamed to admit that now. Then a voice spoke behind me. "Lost there, friend?" I spun around so fast I almost fell. A man stood a few yards away between two trees. He wore a blue coat. At first, relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. He was another Union reenactor. He had a cap, a haversack, a cartridge box, all the right gear. In the dim moonlight, most of his face was hidden under the shadow of his hat, but his shape was familiar enough. "Thank God," I said. "You scared the hell out of me." He did not answer. I took a step closer. "You with the Pennsylvania group?" I asked. "We were camped near you, right?" "No," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. "I'm with the 3rd Kentucky." That struck me as strange. I did not know of any 3rd Kentucky group at the event. Maybe there was one and I had missed them. Events get big. Units merge and split for scenarios all the time. Besides, I had hit my head and had apparently lost hours, so I was not exactly in the best state to question details. "Do you know where the others are?" I asked. He nodded slowly and pointed off to the right. "We're all still here, friend," he said. "All still here down in the hollow." He did not explain. He turned and started walking. "Follow me, friend," he said. "Follow me and we'll all be back together where we ought to be." I followed. Not closely. Something about him made me keep a few yards between us. The woods grew thicker as we walked. Branches scratched at my sleeves. The ground became uneven. My head still hurt, and I leaned on my rifle like a walking stick. I tried asking him more questions. "How far is camp?" No answer. "Did the battle end already?" No answer. "Hey, do you have a lantern?" Still nothing. He just kept walking. After a while, he began muttering. Then I heard the words, "In the hollow is where we lay," he said, "and there we remain until the earth forgives us for what we did to it." I stopped walking for half a second. "What did you say?" He continued forward. "In the hollow is where we lay." His voice did not change, "and there we remain until the earth forgives us." I should have turned around then. I know that. But the woods behind me looked no safer than the woods ahead, and despite everything wrong about him, he was still the only person I had found. So I followed. Eventually, the trees opened into a shallow dip in the land, a hollow. The ground rolled downward into a dark basin crowded with brush, roots, and fallen branches. Moonlight touched the edges but did not seem to reach the bottom. It looked deeper than it should have, like a wound in the earth. The man in blue stopped at the edge with his back to me. "Here," he said. He pointed down. I looked past him into the darkness. "This ain't camp," I said. "Where the hell is everyone?" He did not answer. A blade flashed. It happened so fast that for a second my brain could not understand what I had seen. A saber came out of the dark hollow and cut through the man's neck. His head dropped from his shoulders. It hit the ground with a soft, heavy sound and rolled once in the leaves. His body remained standing for a moment. Then a man in muddy gray clothes climbed out of the dip. He wore a slouched hat pulled low over his face. His jacket was ragged. His trousers were stiff with mud. He gripped the saber in both hands like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He did not look like a reenactor. That was the first thing my mind noticed. His clothes were not clean enough, not intentionally aged, not the kind of campaign impression some guys put together by rubbing dirt on their knees and acting smug about it. This man looked ruined, starved. His face was gaunt under the brim of his hat. His beard hung in dirty clumps. His eyes were dark pits. He swung the saber again and hacked into the headless body of the bluecoat. I dropped my rifle. The sound made him turn. He looked at me. "You ain't supposed to be here," he said. His voice was thick and dry. "You ain't supposed to be here." He raised the saber and started toward me. I stumbled backward. My legs felt weak and useless. My boots slipped in the pine straw. The man came on with jagged steps, like his joints did not work right anymore, but rage kept him moving anyway. "You ain't supposed to be..." His words cut off. A bayonet burst through his chest from behind. Another man in a blue coat stood behind him, driving the rifle forward with both hands. The rebel gasped, folded around the blade, and was dragged backward. Then more figures rose from the hollow, blue and gray, dozens of them. Maybe more. They crawled, stumbled, and dragged themselves up from the dip like the ground was vomiting them out. They were covered in mud. Some had bandages soaked black. Some were missing parts of themselves that no living person could survive without. One man had his jaw hanging loose against his neck. Another had half his face hidden by a dark hole. They began fighting, not reenacting. Fighting rifle stocks cracked against skulls. Bowie knives flashed. Men tackled each other into the leaves. A bluecoat with one arm drove his shoulder into a gray-clad man and bit into his face. Two Confederates dragged a Union soldier back toward the hollow while he clawed furrows into the dirt. There was no shouting like at an event, no dramatic orders, no audience, only grunts, wet impacts, and the sound of bodies struggling in mud. The rebel with the saber, still impaled on the bayonet, was pulled backward by two men who grabbed his ankles. They dragged him toward the hollow, rifle and bayonet still stuck through his chest. He clawed at the ground as he went, leaving black trails in the soil. I could not move. I kept telling myself this had to be some group of lunatics. Maybe reenactors on drugs. Maybe locals messing with me. Maybe I had wandered into some hidden night scenario I had not been told about. But no one screamed for help. No sirens came, no flashlights cut through the trees. And the men in that hollow kept killing each other with the tired determination of people who had already done it 1,000 times. Then I saw the man who had led me there. His headless body stood at the edge of the hollow, limp but upright. His shoulders turned toward me. One hand lifted, he pointed down into the ditch. Though he had no mouth, I heard his words in my head. "In the hollow is where we lay, and there we remain until the earth forgives us for what we did to it." That broke me. I ran. I do not remember grabbing my rifle. I do not think I did. I just turned and sprinted into the dark, branches tearing at my coat, roots catching my boots, my head pounding with every step. Behind me, the sounds of fighting continued. Steel on bone, wood on flesh, bodies falling, then laughter, not happy laughter. Dead laughter. I ran until my chest felt like it would burst. At some point, lights appeared ahead of me, real lights, white beams moving between trees. Voices called my name. A ranger's flashlight hit my face, and I fell to my knees. My buddies from the 105th crowded around me. Someone kept asking where I had been. Someone else said I was bleeding. Another person told me not to move. They loaded me into an ambulance. The EMTs checked me over and said I had a nasty bump on the head, likely a concussion, dehydration, and shock. Nothing else. No explanation for where I had been. According to my unit, I had disappeared during the final charge. 1 second I was on the flank, then smoke rolled across the line. Then I was gone. They searched for me for 4 hours. 4 hours. I remember maybe 20 or 30 minutes after waking in the woods, but time clearly did not care what I remembered. The next morning, one of the guys found my rifle. It was lying near the edge of the fort where I had fallen. Not in the woods, not near any hollow, near the field. Exactly where I should have been. I never told them the whole truth. I said I must have hit my head, wandered off confused, and gotten lost. That became a joke with the group. Every time someone stepped away from camp, someone else would say, "Don't get lost like him." I laughed along. What else was I supposed to do? Tell them a dead Union soldier from a unit that was not even on the event roster led me into the woods to watch ghosts murder each other in a hollow. Tell them I saw men in blue and gray dragging each other back into the earth. Tell them the dead were still fighting because the ground had not forgiven them. No, you learn quickly what people are willing to hear. I do not reenact much anymore. A festival here or there, living history demonstrations, nothing deep in the woods, nothing near dusk. I do not do siege battles. I do not work skirmish lines. I do not follow men I do not recognize, no matter what uniform they wear. Sometimes older guys in the hobby talk around the fire after spectators leave. They tell stories about footsteps in empty camps, drums in the woods, voices calling roll after midnight. They laugh while telling them, but not always at the right places. Now I listen more carefully. I believe more than I used to, because I know there are places where the past is not past. There are places where history does not sleep. There are places where men are still down in the hollow, dragging each other through mud, waiting for forgiveness that may never come. And sometimes, if you fall in the wrong place at the wrong time, they notice you. I think that is what frightens me most. Not that I saw them, but that they saw me. And when that headless bluecoat pointed into the hollow, I do not think he was only showing me where they lay. I think he was inviting me to join them. Story 4. The Angelica likely got her name from the flower. That was what I always thought, anyway. The pale greens and whites of the plant were reflected in the paint across the rig's steel frame. Whoever designed her had clearly leaned into the idea. Even her railings and upper structures had a strange softness to them from a distance, almost botanical, as if someone had tried to make 200,000 tons of iron look like something that had grown out of the sea instead of being dragged there by men. It was a ridiculous thought, but I found myself thinking about ridiculous things during lunch. There wasn't much else to do. I'd sit high on the upper decks, facing north, watching the open sea. Most days, there was nothing out there but gray water and gray sky. The North Atlantic rolled in long, heavy swells, each one looking like it had traveled from the edge of the world just to pass under us. Sometimes, if the weather was clear enough, I might see a tanker on the horizon or some distant vessel cutting a thin, dark line through the waves. But most days, there was nothing. I liked it that way. Up there, at least, I could breathe. Truth be told, I worked below. I was a welder, one of the men assigned to the rig's legs. My job was to keep the Angelica standing. That meant sealing fractures, reinforcing stressed steel, patching damage, and pretending not to think too hard about what would happen if one of those legs ever gave way for good. The Angelica was a rich operation, well-funded, well-staffed, built with more money than most men could imagine. Each leg had 2 dive teams assigned to it, 16 divers rotating in and out depending on who had shipped off, who had come back from shore, who was injured, who was too shaken to go under again, and who pretended not to be. I never rotated early. I took every extra shift I could get. Every hour meant more money sent home to my mother. She never asked for it, but I knew she needed it. I'd worked contract to contract on smaller, poorer rigs before getting hired onto the Angelica. This place paid better even if it sat far north off the coast of Iceland, where the sea bit harder, the wind cut deeper, and the nights seemed to come down heavier than anywhere else on Earth. That was why I preferred afternoon work. I hated diving in the dark. Down there, the only light came from your torch, and the dark did not feel empty. It felt alive. It pressed against you from every side. It watched. It waited. The silence was so thick that after a while it swallowed the sound of your own breathing, even inside the helmet. Then, if you stayed too long, you started imagining another breath underneath yours. Slower, deeper. Something huge sleeping beneath the seabed. Even above deck, the cold never really left you. The wind came off the sea sharp and wet, carrying salt, ice, and the smell of metal. It stung your eyes if you kept them open too long. It slid under collars and cuffs, found the small gaps in your clothes, and settled in your bones. Still, I found peace in looking out over the water. The ocean was chaos, but honest chaos. It didn't pretend to be kind. It didn't pretend you could control it. That day, though, something was wrong. I noticed it before I knew what I had noticed. The sea was rough, but not wild. The swells rolled steady beneath the low sky, their backs dark and slick. Mist shifted over the water in pale ribbons. I had just lifted my sandwich and taken a bite when something moved in the distance. At first, I thought it was a trick of the waves. Then I leaned forward. A small boat sat out there. Too small. A rowboat. It should not have been there. No one came that far north in a rowboat, not unless they were dead or mad. And the strange part was not simply that it existed, but that it seemed to ride steady against waves that should have swallowed it whole. The little black shape rose and fell gently, as though the sea itself was carrying it with care. I narrowed my eyes, trying to see if there was someone inside. Then a voice cut through the wind behind me. "Oi, Oscar, what are you doing?" I flinched harder than I wanted to and turned around. Cal stood near the door behind me, shoulders hunched against the cold. He was shorter than me, stocky, broad through the chest, with a face permanently shaped by wind, work, and bad weather. His beard had gone gray around the jaw, and his eyes were the kind that never looked fully relaxed even when he was laughing. "Nothing, Cal," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Just having lunch." His full name was Callum, but no one used full names on the rig. Full names belonged to paychecks, paperwork, and funerals. Out here, you shortened everything you could. "Well, make it quick," he said. "Jared's calling. Says there's a breach on our leg." I frowned. A breach wasn't unheard of. The sea was hard on steel. Storms threw debris against the rig. Currents twisted and pulled. Salt ate everything given enough time. But we had just been down there that morning. "What?" I said. "We were only under a few hours ago." Cal glanced toward the water, then back at me. His voice lowered, almost disappearing under the wind. "Storms churned something up. Hit the leg hard. Cut into it. Whole beast's shaking now." The beast. I hated when the men called the rig that. It made the Angelica sound alive. Still, I swallowed, pulled my coat tighter around myself, and stood. I muttered. "Let's go." The rowboat was gone. We stepped inside, and the moment the heavy door sealed behind us, the wind vanished. The sudden quiet made my ears ring. The rig's interior replaced the roar of the ocean with its own familiar sounds. Hissing steam, groaning pipes, electric hum, distant machinery, and the constant low vibration of steel holding itself together under pressure. We headed down toward the diving chamber. Metal stairs led lower and lower through the structure. The air warmed as we descended, turning thick and oily. Condensation gathered on pipes overhead and dripped onto the grating beneath our boots. Everything smelled of rust, fuel, sweat, and hot metal. Cal walked ahead of me for a while without speaking. Then he said, "Oi, what were ye looking at out there?" I knew what he meant, though I considered lying. "Thought I saw a boat," I said. Cal kept walking. "A boat?" "Aye, some civilian thing, maybe." He gave a dry laugh. "Out here? What, like those rich bastards from the islands playing sailor?" "Nothing like that." The image of it came back to me. Small, dark, steady, just a rowboat. Cal stopped so suddenly that I nearly ran into his back. For a moment, he stood completely still. No joke, no curse, no rough comment. The sound of the pipes seemed to grow louder around us. Then he turned his head slightly, not enough to face me fully. "The ferryman," he whispered. The word moved through me in a way I didn't like. I gave a small laugh, but it came out wrong. "The what?" Cal turned fully then. Before I could react, he grabbed a fistful of my shirt and pulled me close. He was shorter than me, but he held me like iron. His eyes locked onto mine, and whatever I saw in them killed the laugh in my throat. It was not anger. Anger I could handle. This was fear. "Lad," he said softly, "don't go up there anymore." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" His hand tightened on my shirt. "Not after you see him." "See who?" Cal's jaw worked like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. Then he released me so suddenly I stepped back. "Forget it," he muttered. He turned and continued down the stairs. I followed, but something in me had shifted. Cal was one of the hardest men I knew. He had worked rigs longer than I'd been alive. He had seen fires, blowouts, snapped cables, divers pulled up wrong, and storms that made men pray who had never believed in God. I had seen him drink through injury and laugh through bad news. I had never seen him afraid of a word before. Neither of us spoke after that. Not really. The Angelica filled the silence for us. Pipes rattled. Valves hissed. Metal groaned under strain. Somewhere deep below, machinery thudded in a rhythm that sounded too much like a heartbeat. By the time we reached the dive deck, the air was warmer and heavier. Artificial light buzzed overhead. The walls had been decorated with pale plastic plants, the kind someone in management probably thought made the place feel less like an industrial coffin. The greens were soft, almost the same color as the rig's exterior paint, but against the steel walls they looked wrong. Fake life in a place built to survive death. "Hey, good to see y'all." Gabe's voice carried across the room before I even saw him. He stood near the equipment racks, blonde hair catching the overhead light, face too clean and cheerful for a man who worked offshore. He had an American brightness about him that never seemed to dim, no matter how bad the weather got. Cal didn't slow down. "Lad, shut it," he muttered, waving him off like a fly. I gave Gabe a small nod. "Good to see you." He smiled, but his eyes moved from me to Cal and back again. He could tell something was off. Everyone could. Probably bad news traveled differently on a rig. It didn't need words. It moved through postures, silence, the way men avoided looking directly at one another. I crossed to my station and started gearing up. My hands did the work automatically. Suit, harness, helmet check, torch, welding gear, airlines, communication test. Everything had a place. Everything had an order. Routine was the only thing that kept panic from getting into your fingers before a dive. Behind me, Gabe and Cal spoke in low voices, too low for me to hear. I didn't turn around. I told myself I didn't care. But I could feel their conversation pressing at my back. Something clattered beside me, and I caught the torch Cal tossed my way. Aye, he said, louder now. Make it quick. Don't stay under when it gets dark. I looked at him. Since when do you care? He just stared at me for a moment too long. Since today, that should have been enough for me to ask questions. It should have been enough to make me refuse the dive. But men like us are trained by hunger before we're trained by employers. We work because we need money. We say yes because someone at home depends on us. We pretend fear is superstition because fear doesn't pay. So, I shrugged, you're just trying to get in my head. Cal's expression didn't change. Aye, he said quietly, maybe I am. Gabe helped secure my line while Jared shouted instructions from the platform. The breach was on the north leg, lower than we had hoped, in a section where current hit hard and visibility dropped fast. They needed a patch before nightfall. Temporary seal first, full reinforcement later if the sea allowed it. If the sea allowed it, everything out here depended on permission from something that never answered. The hatch opened and cold air rushed up from below. Even through the suit, I felt it. The sea waited beneath me, black and endless. I stepped onto the ladder and began to descend. The first touch of water always stole the breath from my chest. No matter how many times I did it, cold wrapped around me slowly at first, then completely. The world above blurred and broke apart. Voices crackled in my headset. The rig's lights shimmered through the surface, then faded as I sank lower. I switched on my torch. A narrow cone of white light cut through the water. Beyond it, darkness. I descended along the leg, one gloved hand gripping the guide. The Angelica's steel structure stretched down beside me, thick and massive, disappearing into black below. It was strange how something so enormous could feel fragile underwater. Up top, the rig seemed invincible. Down here, you could see the scars. Rust, scrapes, pressure marks, old repairs. Always testing, my headset crackled. Oscar, you read? Aye, I said. I read. Visibility, poor but workable. Current, rough. I kept descending. The light from the surface grew weaker. Soon there was only my torch, my breathing, and the sound of the water moving around the steel. Then I saw the damage. Cal had not exaggerated. Something had struck the leg hard. A deep gouge cut across the steel, jagged and fresh, with smaller fractures spreading out from it like cracks in ice. The metal around it had bent inward. Whatever hit it had not simply scraped past. It had bitten. I moved closer, steadying myself against the current. What do you see? Jared asked through the comms. Breach confirmed. I said, large impact damage. Steel's cut deep. Debris. No broken container, no wreckage. No sign of whatever had caused it. No debris. A pause. Then Jared said, patch it. I set to work. The torch flared under the water, bright and violent against the black. Sparks behaved strangely down there, blooming and dying in the pressure. I focused on the weld, on the line, on the heat, on the task. That was how you survived underwater. You made your world small. Torch, steel, breath, hand. But I could feel the dark pressing closer. The sea around me had grown too quiet. Even the current seemed to soften. My torch flickered. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Only black water. I returned to the weld. Then I heard something through the headset. At first, I thought it was static, a low scraping sound. Then a voice. Faint. Too faint to understand. Repeat, I said. Say again? Jared answered. We didn't say anything. I froze. The sound came again. Not from above, not through the line. From the water. A slow wooden creak, like oars in locks. My chest tightened. I turned, moving the torch in a wide arc. The beam caught particles in the water. Rust flakes. Silt. Tiny drifting things. Then something larger. Far beyond the leg, just at the edge of my light, a shape moved. Small. Long. A boat. Impossible. I stared into the black as my breath grew louder inside the helmet. A rowboat drifted beneath the rig. It moved through the water without sinking, without rocking, without obeying any law of the world, I understood. It was not on the surface. It was down here, suspended in the dark like it had rode through the sea itself. Inside it sat a figure. I could not see its face, only its arms moving slowly, pulling oars through water that made no sound. Then Cal's voice exploded through my memory. The ferryman. My headset crackled again, but the voice that came through was not Jared's. It was low, wet, close. Don't look in the boat. My body went cold in a way the sea could never manage. I tried to turn back toward the leg, but my eyes refused to obey. The rowboat drifted closer, its dark shape sliding through the water like a thought I couldn't stop thinking. Something lay in the bottom of it, a body, maybe. No, not one body, several. The figure rowing paused. Slowly, it turned its hooded head toward me. My torch flickered once. In that brief stutter of light, I saw the boat clearly, and I saw myself lying inside it. My own face pale and bloated, my eyes open, my mouth full of black water. I screamed so hard the sound broke into static. Story 5. Will you tell me a story? The little girl asked. Her voice was small, but it carried clearly through the quiet bedroom. She was tucked beneath a pale blanket that had been pulled up to her chest. Her dark hair spread across the pillow in soft waves. The room was warm, clean, and almost too still. Outside the window, the city shone with its evening glow, all gold towers and glass roofs catching the last gentle light of the day. The grandmother sat beside the bed with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked tired, though not in a messy way. No one in Luminara was allowed to look messy. Not truly. Her silver hair was pinned into a perfect twist at the back of her head. Her dress had no wrinkles. Even the way she sat seemed practiced, as if she had once been taught the correct angle of the shoulders, the correct placement of the fingers, the correct softness of a smile. Only a short one, the grandmother said, drawing the blanket a little higher beneath the girl's chin. And you must listen very carefully. The child nodded at once. She loved stories, especially the ones her grandmother told. They were never loud or wild. They did not have monsters jumping from shadows or heroes swinging swords. Her grandmother's stories were quiet things. They slipped into the room gently, like moonlight. But once they were there, they stayed in the mind longer than they should have. This is a story, the grandmother began, about a celestial realm that did not grow the way other worlds grow. It was not born from dust, stone, fire, or sea. It did not begin as a village and become a kingdom over hundreds of years. It simply appeared one day, complete in every detail. Its roads were already paved, its towers already stood, its gardens were already blooming, its fountains already flowed. No one remembered building it, and no one could find any record of a time before it existed. The little girl listened with wide eyes. Some people say the realm sits closer to the sky than the earth, the grandmother continued. Others say it rests between the two, held in place by light itself, but nobody knows for certain. That is where most explanations end. It is there because it is there. It exists because it exists. And in that place, questions are not always useful. What? At the center of that realm stands a city made of crystal and mirrors, the grandmother said. Its streets shine even at night and its walls reflect the sky in soft colors of gold, rose, and pale blue. The buildings are tall but never harsh. The bridges curve like ribbons. The windows are clear enough to show your face back to you even when you do not mean to look. The grandmother's eyes drifted toward the window where the glowing city outside stretched in perfect silence. Everywhere in that city, something is reflected. A face in a polished wall, a hand in a silver bowl, a posture in a glass doorway, a smile caught in the side of a passing carriage. Because of this, the people learn very young to adjust themselves without thinking. If a shoulder is slouched, it straightens. If a smile is too sharp, it softens. If a step is too heavy, it becomes graceful. If the eyes look tired, they brighten. The little girl touched her own cheek, as if imagining her face appearing in 100 mirrors at once. They do not need to be told, the grandmother said. They simply notice, and once they notice, they correct themselves. It becomes natural after a while, like breathing, like blinking, like the heart beating beneath the ribs. "Do they like it?" the girl asked. The grandmother looked at her for a moment. "Of course," she said. "Everyone wants to become better." The girl thought about that. The grandmother's smile remained soft, but something in her eyes paused. It was only a flicker, only a tiny hesitation so small that a less observant child might not have seen it. "Better than what they were," she answered. The child sank a little deeper beneath the blanket. The grandmother continued. "No one knows whether the people of that city slowly become something new, or whether the mirrors only help them discover what they were always meant to be. Perhaps there is no difference. Perhaps becoming perfect and finding your true self are the same thing." The little girl's eyes brightened suddenly. "It's Luminara, isn't it?" The grandmother gave a small nod. "Yes, the realm is called Luminara." The girl smiled. She had heard that name all her life. Everyone had. It was painted above schoolroom doors, carved into public fountains, sung during morning hymns, and whispered before ceremonies. Luminara was not only a place, it was safety. It was order. It was everything good and clean and beautiful. And Luminara, the grandmother said, is ruled by Galendra, the luminary sovereign. The child held her breath. Even hearing the name felt important. Galendra is beautiful in a way no painting can capture, the grandmother said. Not simply pretty, not simply elegant. She is beautiful the way light on water is beautiful, or the way a perfect note in a song is beautiful. Her face is calm, her voice is gentle, and when she smiles, people say they remember how they should have been smiling their whole lives. "Have you seen her?" the girl whispered. "Once," the grandmother said. The child sat up slightly. "Really?" The grandmother placed a hand on the blanket, smoothing it back down. "Lie still." The girl obeyed. "I saw her when I was young," the grandmother said. "Younger than your mother is now." There was a ceremony in the western hall of the palace, and many people were called to attend. I was not important. I stood near the back with the others. But when Galendra entered, everyone became quiet. Not because anyone told us to be quiet. We simply understood that silence was the correct thing. The grandmother's smile became distant, like someone who had never made a mistake. The child waited for more, but the grandmother did not explain. "Galendra is the ideal," she continued after a moment. "She is the shape toward which all things lean. No one questions her because there is nothing to question. She appears rarely, only during great ceremonies or when someone is summoned to the palace. Those who stand close to her are said to return changed." "Changed how?" "No. One can describe it exactly," the grandmother said. "They look the same, mostly. They speak the same. They go home to the same families and live in the same rooms. But something about them becomes smoother. Their movements become quieter. Their expressions become easier to look at. Their voices no longer rise too high or fall too low. They become more balanced." The little girl stared at the ceiling. "Does it hurt?" The grandmother looked down at her sharply. The child turned her face toward the wall. "I just wondered." The grandmother took a slow breath. "Not all change is pain." Outside, somewhere far below, bells began to ring. They were soft and distant, marking the evening hour. Their sound floated through the window and entered the room like a reminder. "In Luminara," the grandmother said, "life is peaceful because everyone understands the value of harmony. No one shouts in the streets. No one runs without reason. No one wears clashing colors. No one laughs too loudly at solemn occasions. No one asks questions simply to disturb the air." The girl's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the blanket. "If someone steps out of line," the grandmother continued, They are not scolded in public. That would be ugly, that would draw attention. Instead, people notice quietly. A glance may pass from one person to another. A song may soften around the wrong note. A conversation may slow until the person understands they have made the room uneven. "What if they don't understand?" the girl asked. The grandmother's hand stopped moving over the blanket. "Most people do," she said. "But what if they don't?" The grandmother looked toward the closed bedroom door, then back at the child. "Then they do not last." The girl became very still. The grandmother's voice remained gentle. "Do not look so frightened. It is not a cruel thing. Some people simply cannot carry harmony inside them. They scratch at it, they bend it, they make others remember discomfort. When that happens, Luminara corrects itself. How? For a moment, someone may notice that a person is gone, she said. A chair is empty at dinner. A voice is missing from the morning hymn. A name appears in the mind but does not stay. People feel a little sadness, perhaps, or confusion. But they do not ask questions. Questions can tear holes in peace. So life continues, the hymn goes on, the meal is served. The empty chair is moved away. Soon, even the memory becomes smooth. The child's mouth had gone dry, so everyone forgets them? That sounds like forgetting a person. It sounds like healing, the grandmother corrected softly. The room seemed quiet around that word. The little girl looked at the wall where a framed mirror hung above a small writing desk. In the dim light, she could see both herself and her grandmother reflected in it. The grandmother sat still and calm beside the bed. The child looked smaller than she felt. Her hair was not as neat as it should have been. One side of the blanket had a wrinkle in it. The grandmother followed her gaze and immediately smoothed the wrinkle away. "There is an old story," she said, "about an evening hymn in the hall of silver glass. Hundreds of voices were singing together, each note rising perfectly into the next. The sound was so beautiful that people wept without sadness. But then, near the end, one voice landed slightly out of place. The child did not move. It was not a terrible mistake, the grandmother said. Only one note, a small note, a note that arrived too early and left too late. The hymn continued, of course. No one stopped, no one turned their head. But after the ceremony, nobody could remember who had sung it. The girl whispered, "What happened to them?" The grandmother smiled sadly. "Nothing that needed to be remembered. This is a scary story," she said. The words felt wrong the moment they left her. They seemed to sit in the room like a dropped cup, loud even though they had been spoken quietly. The grandmother's expression changed. Not much, only a little tightening around the eyes, only a careful stillness in her mouth. Then she smoothed the blanket again, pressing out a crease that was barely there. "It is not a scary story," she said. Each word came slowly, chosen with care. "It is a comforting one. Everything becomes as it should be." The grandmother looked toward the mirror. For a second, the child thought she saw something in the reflection behind them. Not a person exactly, more like a tall shape in the brightness near the door. But when she blinked, it was gone. "In Luminara," the grandmother said, "everyone is safe because everything is in harmony." Towers of crystal caught the last of the evening light and sent it back into the sky. Far away, people moved through clean streets and quiet lines. Their faces turned toward polished walls and bright windows. Their postures adjusted, their smiles softened. Their steps became even. The little girl swallowed. "Grandmother?" For a moment, the old woman's face became blank. Not confused exactly, but empty in a way that made the child's heart begin to beat faster. It was like the question had touched something that should not have been touched. "What do you mean?" the grandmother asked. The child sat up a little. "I mean, in the story. If someone asks questions and everyone forgets them, how does anyone know they were ever there?" The grandmother did not move. The room grew colder. The bells outside had stopped, but their silence felt heavier than their sound. The child could hear her own breathing now. She could hear the soft movement of the curtains. She could hear, somewhere deep in the walls, a faint clicking sound like glass being tapped by fingernails. "Lie down," the grandmother said. The child obeyed slowly. The old woman leaned forward and adjusted the blanket once more. Her hands were calm, but her face had gone pale. She looked at the child's pillow, then at the mirror, then at the door. For one strange second, she seemed like someone who had walked into a room and forgotten why. "Grandmother," the girl whispered again. The grandmother looked at her, and something like pain crossed her face. Then it vanished. Her smile returned. "Everything is in harmony," she said. The girl wanted to ask another question, but she suddenly could not remember what it was. The thought slipped away from her like water through fingers. She blinked, confused. The room seemed brighter than before, too bright. The mirror on the wall reflected the bed, the blanket, the grandmother's perfect posture. But in the mirror, the child's own face looked faint, almost like mist. She turned her head quickly toward the glass. "Do not look there," the grandmother said. The child froze. From outside the room came a soft sound. Not footsteps, not voices, something smoother. A gathering of light, perhaps, if light could move with intention. The line beneath the bedroom door glowed pale gold. The grandmother closed her eyes. "Please," the child whispered. "I don't want to be forgotten." For a moment, she was only an old woman sitting beside a little girl's bed. Not a servant of harmony, not a citizen of a perfect city, just a grandmother who had told one story too many, or perhaps one story too honestly. Then the glow under the door brightened. The old woman opened her eyes, and whatever tenderness had been there became smooth again. "There is no need to be afraid," she said softly. "Nothing truly good is ever lost." The child tried to speak, but her voice would not come. Her hands clutched the blanket, but the fabric no longer felt solid beneath her fingers. The clicking in the walls grew louder. It sounded like mirrors shifting in their frames, all turning toward the room at once. The grandmother stood. She smoothed the blanket until it was perfectly flat. The child wanted to cry, but she could not remember how. She wanted to call for her mother, but the word mother suddenly felt unfamiliar. She wanted to say her own name, but when she reached for it, there was only empty space. The light beneath the door faded. The room settled. The grandmother looked down at the bed. For a moment, her expression tightened. There was a shape beneath the blanket, or perhaps there had been. The pillow held a faint dent. The air smelled softly of warm hair and sleep. On the bedside table sat a little cup of water beside a toy carved from pale wood. The grandmother stared at it as if it belonged to someone she should know. Then her face eased. She took the cup from the table, though she could not remember who had needed it. She placed the wooden toy into the drawer, though she did not know why it made her chest ache. She looked once more around the room, checking for disorder. The blanket was smooth, the pillow was straight, the mirror was clean. Everything was as it should be. Outside, Luminara glowed in perfect silence. The grandmother walked to the door, paused, and glanced back one last time. For a second, she seemed close to remembering something. A small voice, a question, a warning hidden inside a bedtime story. Then the thought disappeared. She closed the door softly behind her. In Luminara, nothing imperfect is allowed to remain, and nothing that calls perfection into question is remembered.